Prosecutors offer Bryan Kohberger a plea deal despite a mountain of damning evidence. Here's what they had. Okay, so this was obviously posted today, just late this afternoon. So prosecutors had announced a lot of evidence and key legal victories against Bryan Kohberger in the weeks before they offered him a plea deal for the 2022 murder of 4 University of Idaho students. Obviously, you remember this terrible tragedy. I'm trying to see if they have a picture of the kids. These 4 kids right here. Sorry, again, ads everywhere. Let me pull it up. These 4 kids right here were brutally murdered in Idaho, and Bryan Kohberger is alleged to be the murderer. And it looks like if this is indeed true, he is taking a plea deal regarding the murder. So Kohberger's defense pushed for delays. They tried to block most of the evidence against him and even suggested a list of alternate perpetrators who they claimed could have committed the killings. The judge denied most of their motions, allowing a tidal wave of evidence to be presented against the 30-year-old criminology PhD student at his trial, which was scheduled for next month. So Bryan Kohberger was going to go into trial next month, and all of this was going to be put on display. I don't know if it was going to be a public trial or a private trial, but a lot of it was going to be put on display for the world. And you had this PhD student in criminology, which is even more creepy. Somebody studying criminology try to pull off what they thought was going to be a crime that they could have gotten away with. I don't know. But there was other interesting things that I wanted to read about and hear with you guys. The families of victims of the 4 victims, they were slammed the decision to spare Kohberger a trial and the chance of death by firing squad. I don't know if the death penalty is completely ruled out here, but if he's taking a plea deal, more than likely you would think he took a plea deal to get out of the death penalty. Obviously, the parents, it sounds like at least some of the parents are pushing for the death penalty, which they have the right to feel how they feel. I'm not here to debate the death penalty with you guys, but that is, you had one of the mothers that said they supported the plea deal, while Madison's family has publicly not weighed in. So you had some families saying like, why would he take the plea deal? Like, why did we give him a plea deal? We wanted to see the death penalty. You had one person, from what I can tell, say that, okay, it's fine. Like, he can take the plea deal. He's obviously going to serve 4 life sentences, so he's never going to see freedom again, from what I can tell. And then you have one family that has not weighed in yet. So you have so this goes through the evidence. So here's some of the evidence that they had against Bryan. You had the man with bushy eyebrows. One of the 2 survivors of Moscow, Idaho, attacked, spotting a masked man with bushy eyebrows prowling around the house around 4 a.m. when the stabbings occurred. Obviously, it's terrible. If you look, you do see some bushy eyebrows. I don't have a great picture here, but you saw that one there. You had, let's see what other evidence they have. The description was bad news for Kohberger, whose own brows are replete with wool. His defense asked the judge to bar testimony and evidence related to bushy eyebrows, calling a witness's description irrelevant and unreliable. Hippler denied that motion, as well as a motion to block that, as well as a motion to block the survivor's initial 911 call, in which one mentioned seeing a strange man in the house. So you had the defense trying to just stop any piece of evidence that the prosecutor was trying to get in. Security camera footage showed a white Hyundai Elantra circling the area around the victim's house in the early morning on the day of the murders, and finally speeding away after 4 a.m. Police began looking for the local Hyundai Elantra drivers and landed on Kohberger, a PhD criminology student at a nearby Washington State University. So students say they saw a white Hyundai, they looked for a white Hyundai, and then now they found a man with bushy eyebrows. Again, innocent until proven guilty, but not looking too hot for Bryan. Okay, so you can kind of see some bushy eyebrows here. Kind of a creepy picture. Cell phone tower records. Cell phone tower records showed that Kohberger, or at least his phone, had been up and about during the morning of the stabbings. His phone disconnected from the network around 2:30 a.m. in Pullman, Washington, probably went on airplane mode, then reconnected around 4:30 a.m. near Blaine, a town outside of Moscow. So now he has to, I don't know if he has to overcome this, but there has to be an explanation. Why did your phone disconnect from the period of times that the killings were happening? Okay, so Mike says DoorDash driver being able to ID his vehicle and him that morning as she parked next to his vehicle to drop off the food. Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Very interesting. Okay, record also placed Kohberger near a house a dozen times in the days before the murder. So those cell phone records placed him near the house a dozen times. He was also nearby around 5 hours after the slaying, suggesting he cased the property and returned to the crime scene. With serial killers, it's common that they do want to return to the crime scene. So very interesting. A bloody DNA lace knife sheath. Perhaps the most damning of all, prosecutors found a physical evidence that put Kohberger inside the house. Investigators found a bloody sheath for a K-bar knife at the murder scene. His DNA was found on the button strap of the sheath. So, I mean, that's pretty much like, I'm not the judge, I'm not the jury, but as somebody on the outside looking in, if you give it to me at face value, I'd love to hear what the defendants would say to this. Kohberger's Amazon.com purchases showed that he bought a K-bar ahead of the attack. Okay. This is not looking good for this guy, for the defense. Okay. Detectives recovered trash from Kohberger's Pennsylvania family home and obtained genetic samples to match the DNA. Some of the samples were actually recovered from the house next door as officers watching the suspect observed him dropping off bags of trash in his neighbor's trash cans. Okay. For the defense, this does not look good. Okay. This attorney is probably like, what do we do? Because they can't get any of this evidence dismissed, and they need to be able to overcome all this stuff, because that's a lot of stuff to overcome. Suspicious gear. When authorities finally arrested Kohberger, they found a gun, a knife, and a black surgical mask in his parents' house. But most damning of all was an ID card authorities say was connected to the murders, hidden inside a latex glove. So he had an ID. The ID card led to speculation that Kohberger knew one of the victims ahead of time and kept their ID as a souvenir, or even planned to leave Joker-style calling cards at the scenes of other killings. Creepy, and that's just bad for the defense. So you have all of that evidence. I want to go ahead and cover a little bit more of the reactions regarding this. But you had so much evidence to overcome, and it's not a wonder. This guy could either choose to serve 4 lifetime sentences or the death penalty. And I'm sure that's not something that I'm pretty sure he didn't make that decision lightly, because I don't think he's going to have a very good life for the rest of his life, because this is a pretty brutal crime. I want to see, there were some other reactions. So this is an Idaho state. Let's see if this is a paywall. Okay, let's go ahead and read this. There are ads everywhere. I apologize, but let me go ahead and pull this up. Okay. So let me go ahead and share this with you guys. So the headline is that the Beyond Furious Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger accepts plea deal. So let's see who's Beyond Furious and what happened. So he's the suspect. A victim's family member told the Idaho Statesman that they received a letter from the prosecution and provided a copy of that letter to the Statesman confirming the agreement. The plea deal was first reported by News Nation Monday afternoon. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, we talked about this. The families of the victims met with prosecutors last week to discuss the possibility of a plea deal, which the prosecution in a letter said weighed heavily in the decision-making process. We cannot fathom the toll that this case has taken on your family, read the letter signed by Leta, County Prosecutor Bill Thompson, and Ashley Jennings, his senior deputy. This resolution, in our sincere attempt to seek justice for your family, this agreement ensures that the defendant will be convicted, will spend the rest of his life in prison, and will not be able to put you and the other families through uncertainty of decades of post-conviction appeals. So he's probably, again, I'm not an attorney, he's probably waiving all of his rights to appeal with this plea deal. The victims we talked about the victims. Obviously, it's terrible. I don't want to get into the crime. I just want to see. Obviously, the crime is terrible, and there's a lot you can go read about on that. I want to see more about this. Okay, the plea deal. The defense requested an offer from the prosecution. We'll take the death penalty off the table in exchange for Kohberger pleading guilty to all charges. The 4 first-degree murder counts and an additional charge of felony burglary. He's expected to appear at the Ada County Courthouse on Wednesday at 11 a.m. So tomorrow at 11 a.m. for a change of plea hearing, according to the letter sent to the families. A notice just filed just before 3 p.m. Monday, publicized on the court's website Tuesday, confirming the hearing is scheduled. So tomorrow morning, we will know if Bryan Kohberger is going to accept the plea deal. which the plea deal is taking the death penalty off the table. This plea deal, from what I can tell from this article, is taking the plea deal off the table in exchange for pleading guilty to all charges, all 4 first-degree murder charges, and the additional charge of felony burglary. So he'll appear tomorrow at 11 a.m. Subscribe, because I'll try to cover that for you guys, not at the time, but later in the day. I'll try to make a quick video talking about the plea deal. I think it's interesting. If Kohberger pleads guilty as expected, he'll likely be sentenced in late July, with the agreed upon sentence being life in prison, according to the letter. If he doesn't, the trial would proceed as planned, and the evidence would come out. It'd be a long trial. He would appeal. It would be a long time until the death penalty is received, if that's what the court decided. As part of the plea deal, Kohberger will also have to waive his right to an appeal. Yep, we talked about that. He will never be eligible for parole. Okay, understandable. The trial court administrator and spokesperson for the Idaho court system declined to comment, of course. The Gonclave's family, beyond fears. The Gonclave's family members have been staunch advocates for the death penalty to be applied in the Kohberger case, while other families haven't been so outspoken. There's no equivalent aside from the death penalty for someone convicted of murder. I'm going to call him Steve G, wrote in a text message to the states in days before the deal was reached. The more victims someone is accused of killing, he added, the further it should tip the scales to death as the only option. So obviously he's super heavy on the death penalty. We're beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Mr. G's family posted on the Facebook page Monday afternoon. Hours later, they reiterated their frustration with the prosecution. They said they have done everything they could to push for the death penalty for Kohberger, having fought harder than anybody could ever imagine. For Ben Mogan, Madison's father, the plea deal wasn't as upsetting. He told the statesman if avoiding a trial meant his family can avoid reopening wounds that they've already worked towards healing, then he accepts the agreement. The plea deal the prosecution has proposed is one that punishes the perpetrator of this horrendous crime, protects the public from further harm. Mogan's family wrote in a statement to the statesman, and allows all of us who knew and loved these 4 young people the time to grieve without the anxiety of the long and gruesome trial, years of appeals, and potential for mistrials along the way. Mogan's family also thanked the prosecution for the dedication and painstaking work. May we all protect our peace in whatever way possible, unite in community, and focus on joy. The statement said, please do an act of kindness this week, so a glimmer of Maddie's light may live on. Obviously one of the victims. Stacy Chapman, the mother of Ethan Chapman, told KTVB that she'll be at the plea hearing. The plea deal late in the process came as a surprise to even veterans in the legal field. Edwina is the criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor in Boise. She said writing was on the wall for Kohberger in terms of death penalty if the jury found him guilty of the killings, and might have proved too big of a risk and resulted in the change. This is interesting. That may have led to some additional conversation between the defense team and Kohberger. L. Cox told the statesman by phone over concerns that he could expect no other sentence with a conviction. These are the dice I did not want to roll with the client, she said. Maybe you get an anti-death penalty juror, but you may not. Given the series of rulings against Kohberger's attorneys, which included several involving the effort to take the death penalty off the table, removing the possibility of such a sentence is ultimately a victory for the defense. So the defense is saying that this is a victory by not having the death penalty. Obviously, that's for the victim to decide, and the victim's families. Hopefully, they can come to peace with whatever the trial comes to. Obviously, a terrible crime and not a crime that you ever want to see repeated. Absolutely terrible. Hopefully, justice is served and those families can begin to heal those wounds. Obviously, you can never replace a loved one, but it's absolutely terrible. Consider subscribing if you want to hear the plea deal. I'll try to see if I can find a video of the court hearing to see if we can react to that. But it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow with the court hearing. But nonetheless, consider subscribing, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And like always, see you next time.